I had a hard time working with him on that,
Mhm.
and because I was trying to find, I saw this character a certain way, he saw it a different way, and so it was really kind of. But hopefully in the end of it, we found a compromise.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's
You know,
I look at it as like a James Earl Jones on acid kind of, or
well,
Tim.
the character
Yeah.
was written for. It was written for a 350-pound white guy
Mhm.
who had this eating disorder,
Mhm.
and so it opened with this guy cooking food and just eating it and being very kind of gross with his consumption. So when they cast me, I'm not 350 pounds. I'm not a white guy. The clown makeup turned into almost kind of a, I don't know what it was. It wasn't clown. It was kind of African Zulu. It was something. It all those dynamics sort of shifted, and suddenly, yeah, I felt it made it more interesting because it wasn't cast the way that I think they originally intended. So, and the thing with the wife and all that stuff was kind of it was a weird mixture. I
Mhm.
wanted to go further in certain ways, and the um, director, and he was pretty young, saw it a different way, and which is why so that made it difficult to do.
Sure.
But in the end, you kind of get to But it was a fascinating character. There were places I wanted to go further with. I mean, his wife is leaving him, and having been a guy who's been married, who
Mhm.
you kind of know what that's like, and you have a director who's just out of college, and but he's telling you about relationships. There's a part of me that just go, you know what? And so it was a lot of it had to do with trust, and uh, but like I said, hopefully we got to a better place.
Sure.
Uh,
One of my I'll tell you one of my, and I think I mentioned this in my first email to you, is one of my favorite things I think you've done, and I'm such a huge fan of it, is that cameo on the Ben Stiller show. Where the angry police chief.
oh, yeah, I haven't seen that. I remember working with Ben. He was young, and my manager really wanted me to do this show because he was going to be this hot new guy, and I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, whatever. And but I remember having a lot of fun with him. I ran into him a couple of times. He's still yet to cast me in one of his movies that actually paid, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to work with him.
That's funny. I just recently, I'm sort of ashamed to admit the fact that I didn't. There's a couple of films you did that I got to just got to watch in preparation to talking to you, and I'm sad that it took me so long to see him. And that's Everything's Jake and
Oh, everything changed.
A
Yeah,
Stranger in the Kingdom.
yeah. And I actually enjoyed both those. Everything is Jake. I got the script from a couple of kids who had just graduated from Syracuse,
Mhm.
and I thought they had actually ripped some poor guy's story off, and but they wrote it, and I liked the character. I liked. Um, I think part of, like I was saying, growing up, being poor but not seeing
Right.
it from that place. You know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
life is great, and I had a great childhood, and I laughed a lot, and what somebody else might perceive from the outside is not what I see. And Jake was a guy who's homeless on the street, but he sees from his perspective, he life is good, and I think when I was researching that character, I went to New York, and I had decided to leave all my uh money and everything, and I was going to live on the streets for about 3 or 4 days to just kind of get a sense of how you survive out there. Well, I lasted about 10 hours, and then I was like, "It's cold out here." It started to rain. I'm like, "Nah, But I did meet a lot of people, and went to a lot of shelters, met a lot of guys, talked to a lot of guys, some that you could make sense out of, and what I began to realize is that life goes on. When we think when we lose our money, we lose our job, we lose our family, whatever, that it kind of ends,
Mhm.
and then you just kind of you're like the Walking Dead until you actually die or something. But no, life goes on, And I think if you can find that, you'll be a happier person because then all the fear of what if kind of disappears.
Sure.
So I like the Jake character, and I'm glad the movie. Unfortunately, the guys who did the movie were fun in terms of putting the film together, but they didn't understand, I think, the business in terms of how you market a film and how you get it out there, and so it
Yeah.
never really got out there. And
Slipped through the
Stranger in the
cracks.
Kingdom,
Yeah.
yeah, it did. It just kind of, and in time, but then it became dated, and then so, um, and it was too bad because we really worked hard on it. Stranger in the Kingdom, I just thought the director had a lot of stories he was trying to tell, and but I like that character idea, and it was based on a true story of a
Mhm.
black guy, a minister from California, wanted to get his family out of the city and out of the South Central LA, and saw this job, and went to Vermont, and of course all him being an outsider, and also the racial stuff, and they ended up. Some guy was driving by his house and said that they saw him having sex with his white maid.
Mhm.
Anyway, he ended up being prosecuted. It was like all this stuff, and the city now has a plaque there on there
Mhm.
telling the story, and and it was an injustice, and he was basically ran out of town, and it
Yeah.
was a big
Yeah.
scandal over nothing. Um, but yeah, I like that guy. I
Yeah,
thought he was
both of those films are just incredible performances on your end, though. Just incredible.
Oh, thanks. But once again, they didn't get any sort of,
Right.
you know. So it's, but
Mhm.
I did enjoy doing them.
Yeah. And then I know you've been asked about it quite a bit, so I don't want to spend that much time on it. But I'm just like you. I'm a huge fan of The Crow, and it's a special movie because it's a Michigan movie, right? In many ways. Because James
Yeah, me,
O'Barr,
yeah,
you're from
right,
Michigan. David
yeah,
Patrick
yeah,
Kelly is from Michigan.
right, yeah,
So I mean, I just when I watched that film, and I just went back and took a look at it this weekend because I hadn't seen it in a while, and I noticed just this incredible sadness in everyone's eyes. Like
yeah,
in particular in that character that you play.
yeah.
So where did you? I mean, when you get a script and you read that script, I mean, how do you decide to approach him, and where do you think that sadness comes from for that character?
Well, he had talked about he talks when that scene that Brandon loved that scene, and I remember we worked on it. He was so happy to get a chance to what he said to actually act
Mhm.
as opposed to a lot of the action stuff. But the scene where he comes to my apartment,
Right.
and there's a photo of my wife who now he's separated from, and as his job is not going well. It's, life sometimes just doesn't turn out the way we. It was a kind of a sad, and I haven't seen the movie in so long, so
Mhm.
but there was a humor. There was kind of, when life just sort of gets to that place for that guy,
Mhm.
and there's something about this guy who is the Crow, who he was just an odd character, and but I liked him. But there's something dark about that movie,
Yeah.
and yet it has this light, that Brandon sort of brought to it, and I think he was just a genuinely good guy who'd been bothered by this tragedy, and who sometimes you just feel. I think yesterday was Father's Day, and I had this moment of feeling like, the one thing I took the most pride in is being a father, and yet
Mhm.
and I thought I was very good when they were little guys. When I have
Mhm.
4 sons, and I could tuck them in, and I could read to them, and I could tell them I, love them, and I could be that guy. But then as they became men, I don't have a role model. I don't know how to do this part. I don't know how to. It's very, very. It's not the way I planned it. It's not sort of. I don't understand the stage.
Sure.
And I think that character as well is like, okay, how did I get here? My wife is gone, the job, he hasn't been promoted because he's trying to do the right thing. So all these, and yet to want to be to help this guy. I love that character, and he was, to me, it was different. And I haven't seen it before. I haven't looked at the movie, but there was something about him that was almost sad, and I
Yes.
don't know, that. I think sometimes life feels that way. So you just kind of go, man, I don't know. Some of the, if I'm not careful and don't allow myself to indulge in it, I look at my career and I kind of go, yeah, but it would have been great, and I wish I could. And if somebody had just seen or whatever, and you can't stay there, but there's
Right.
a kind of like, not that I feel I lost anything, because I've been blessed. I've traveled the world. I've certainly made a good living, but I had so much more to offer.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And sometimes when I get now, the frustrating thing is I get on the show, and they don't want anything. It's like, yeah, but I'm here. I mean, it's like there's nothing there for me. And so I do a Desperate Housewives, and a friend of mine, Kurt, I can't think of Kurt's last name, but he played the detective on Desperate Housewives, and he had this fantasy with Bree, and so when she rejected him, he sort of started following her around and giving her tickets, and so he had a relationship going on. Well, he got a series, and then they brought in me to kind of be the detective. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get involved in their lives in some way, but no, you're just a detective, and
Yeah.
and you kind of go, yeah, but I mean, but but there's more. I mean, there's more. There's so much more I want to give. And so a lot of the stuff is just that we don't want, and that's the frustrating thing
Yeah,
that I
absolutely.
find in my work is just like, oh yeah, I'm in. People say, well, you're in this movie. Yeah, I'm in it, but but I'm not. And yet I want to. I've studied all these years. I've done all this work. I've so much I want to bring to the work, and
Sure.
then you just, so that's the hard part of acting now for me. And then you kind of go, and yet I like to stay busy.
Yes, right.
So
Absolutely.
you don't want to just sit and turn everything down. But then maybe there's a stage when you go back to um, the writing, and you go back to going, okay, then maybe it's time for me to be more creative. Um, but I constantly work. I'm working a lot now.
Do you have
But
do you have
that's the hard part.
do you have films in you? You think that you're ready to write?
Yeah, right now I've been working on. I did The Great White Hope. I don't know how many years ago, 30 years ago, 35 something. And I've always been fascinated when I did the play and researched that character, and I think it was the best thing I've ever done. Um, it was the life transforming. I mean, it changed my life really. Um, that character was pretty phenomenal. But I was fascinated by the real life guy, and the more I looked into his life, the more I realized that the play was a fictional version. It actually was less interesting than his real life. I mean, this guy was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And so I've always wanted to tell his story, but then as time went on, I thought, well, to me to play the young Jack, I couldn't do that. But he died at 68 in a car crash.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what I've been working on is a one-man show about him at the end of his life, because it's only, uh, a year older than me
Sure.
when he
Sure.
died. So now's the time to kind of um, look at it from a different perspective. And so I've wanted to tell his story, and that's what we had it up, did it in Colorado, did it in Pennsylvania, did it out here in L.A., but the guy I was working with, we've had some issues, so it got put on hold for a while. But that's one story. I feel obligated to tell his story. I think in an honest way, in a true way.
Sure.
And so, but there are other things, other stories. I think that now I'd love to tell. I'm doing a little boxing movie for a young filmmaker. I did another movie for called The Dinner Date, which is a wonderful film